New Zealand in the 1990s. He's a very strong advocate of New Zealand as a location and also of New Zealanders as being involved in crew. He's produced several films and including The World's Fastest Indian, which starred Sir Anthony Hopkins. So Murray will share with you his thoughts around New Zealand as a location and New Zealanders being involved with film. So as just get started from me first, and I'll just give you a short outline of what Tourism New Zealand has been doing to leverage The Hobbit over the last 12 months. So firstly, the world's eyes have been on New Zealand, and we are a small country, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that, but we are a small country. We're geographically isolated, and a lot of that gives us positive because of people have to venture to get here, have an adventurous spirit, and there is a lot of cachet about coming to New Zealand. But that does mean we have to take advantage of when the world's eyes are on us through things like film, and particularly The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings in previous years. So through the Hobbit movies, it's allowed New Zealand to highlight us as a great place to visit, a great place to do business, and lastly, and obviously, a great place to produce film. And what we've been doing at Tourism New Zealand and with the rest of the New Zealand Inc. agencies is to take that attention and use it to our advantage. When we first were starting to look at what the opportunity around the Hobbit Trilogy was, we knew we were starting from a really good base. If we look at past research, we know that through The Lord of the Rings and also the great advertising that's been done over the past decade, it really has cemented New Zealand as having a perception of stunningly beautiful landscapes and a place that you can come to and enjoy. What we want to be able to do through the film is to add to that so that we can build on those landscapes, the locations, the natural beauty, but really show that there's a lot that you can do within New Zealand and that those locations aren't hard to get to, that they're incredibly accessible. And if we look back to 2004, which was after the Lord of the Rings trilogy, we knew that there was a huge opportunity. Of the visitors that were here in 2004 and that they were interviewed in a departure survey, 87% of them said they were aware of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but more importantly for us as the tourism destination, that it was filmed and made in New Zealand. 6% of them said that the Lord of the Rings was one of the main reasons for visiting, and 1%, well you might say 1% small, but it is still significant, said it was the main reason for coming, and we can actually equate that to a spend of 33 million. So when we look back at 2004, when the announcement came that The Hobbit was going to be filmed in New Zealand, we knew it was an opportunity that we had to take advantage of. And what we wanted to do is we really wanted to say that Middle-earth is New Zealand, and that what you do see in the movies, what you saw in Lord of the Rings, and what now people have seen through Film 1, you may think that those locations are made through CGI or aren't in fact real, that the backdrop is real, and they are actually locations in New Zealand that as a visitor you can get to. So we've done that through 100% Middle-earth, 100% pure New Zealand. And what's been really important as we've rolled that out over the past 18 months is that is an idea that's provided us a platform to go through our paid, earned and owned assets. So as the opportunities have come up, we've had a really strong paid campaign. We've then supported that through media visits, the media that have come down for the film, and also attracting our own media down so that we've got good editorial going through both print, broadcast, online and social. And then as we've created that preference, that desire, the call to action is to newzealand.com and our social assets where we can really build on how to experience New Zealand and how to get to the locations. So that has all really come through into three main stages, and I'll quickly go through pre-premiere, the actual premiere, and then what we've done over the last few months. So in terms of pre-premiere activity, a key component of that has been our international media program, and it's been amazing since Lord of the Rings and as the build-up and the announcement of The Hobbit, how much interest there is, or what The Hobbit gives us in terms of a pitch idea or a hook for media to come down. And just a few examples here of the coverage we got prior to the film release. Lonely Planet, with a circulation of 62,000, had a 14-page spread. The Daily Telegraph, with a circulation of almost just over 500,000. We've also had the Telegraph Online, which has a larger distribution or a reach of 750,000. So without The Hobbit, without that hook, it would be really challenging for us to continue to get good coverage for New Zealand. We then, to build up to the film premiere, through our marketing communications team, we produced a stunning television commercial which has really provided the backbone for our paid coverage over the past 12 months. So, Cameron, if we could just play the TVC, please.
Your journey starts beneath southern skies, where glacier and ocean meet. A land where giant eagles once guarded the skies, where creatures dwell in ancient caves, where streams that run hot feed rivers that run cold, and where warrior princesses know how to warm your heart, where wizards turn water into wine, and where the people of the land can fly, where sea creatures walk on land, and where you can play on mountains protected by gods. It's a place that will forever keep you under its spell. Traveler, your dreams are waiting.
So what we're doing through this activity, along with our display work and online, is to really build the preference for New Zealand as a destination. And we've been able to do that through taking a little bit, before the film came out, a little bit of that fantasy and talk about New Zealand as a place to visit. And then, as you can see as we go through at the bottom of the screen here, really bring in some more of those fantasy elements through our partners at Weta Digital, Weta Workshop, who were able to really bring the film to life through our work. And it's really important that we do test this work to ensure that it is having an impact or resonates with our potential visitors. And in the US market, when we tested the television commercial with them, 78% said when they saw that it motivated them. It motivated them to think about New Zealand as a place for a holiday. So backing that up with our partner messages, we know that it has impact and resonates with them. We then moved onto the premiere activity, and through the partnership that we were able to form with the filmmakers, with Wingnut and with Warner Brothers, we were able to put and pitch to the media a joint program around the premiere. And that was really important for us, for New Zealand, so that when the media were down here viewing the film for the first time, we were able to infuse New Zealand messages within that. We saw around about 100 international media down in New Zealand, and some really big players that have been on our target list for a long time, and without the movie we haven't been able to attract them here. So people like NBC from the US, we had TF1, we had CTV, T4, Channel 7, 9 and 10 out of Australia. So there's 3 networks out of Australia here at the same time. And also over 30 print and media outlets from New Zealand and Australia. When we looked at that all together, that reach, the people who could see the coverage about New Zealand over the week and then leading up to the release of the film, was hundreds of millions. And yes, they saw great footage, great reviews of the film, but they were left with no doubt that that film was made in New Zealand by smart, talented New Zealanders, and also about the locations that they could visit. And the coverage that we got from a tourism viewpoint equated to almost 25 million equivalent advertising value. And the investment we put in that, the return on that is phenomenal. We also wanted to really make sure that the media who were here knew that there was tourism product available, and that if visitors did come down, there was locations they could visit. So with the help of the filmmakers and Warner Brothers, we hosted a day event at Hobbiton at the movie set. So with over 80 international and New Zealand media there, guided tours and the exclusive interviews with the cast, and particularly the dwarfs, it meant that we got, again, amazing coverage for the film. But what they did talk about and they raved about was this location, that it wasn't a film set. It was real, it was set in rural New Zealand, and a great experience for travellers when they come down. We also used that opportunity to launch a new product at the Hobbiton set, which is the Green Dragon, which is the replica pub with its own brew. And if you haven't been there, I really do suggest you go. It's a fantastic place. And what we have seen through the Hobbiton movie set with Russell and the team who own the set there, they are now getting in excess of 150,000 visitors per annum through the set. So the media coverage. And then to support that, newzealand.com because what we're trying to do through all this coverage is attract potential visitors to raise preference, but importantly, use that interest for them to actually secure that New Zealand holiday. So through newzealand.com, we ensured that we had really strong, what we'd call Hobbit heavy content, looking at all the new locations within the film and showing how you can get them, pulling out the assets, the cast, the crew comments that we've been able to use because of the partnership with Warner Brothers. And when we look at that content on the site, really high engagement from users with over 13 pages viewed per visit. And that means that it's incredibly high quality content and engaging for those potential visitors. Also supported at that time, we wanted to bring the film to life through some activations, and through working with Auckland International Airport, we had an installation there that over the time that's been up, the total views will be in excess of a million walkthroughs. So again, really welcoming people to New Zealand, home of Middle Earth, 100% Middle Earth, 100% pure New Zealand. On the day of the premiere, November the 28th, we had our team from Tourism New Zealand out at the airport stamping passports. So along with your New Zealand stamp, you got a stamp that said, welcome to New Zealand, home of Middle Earth. A great little souvenir for people who were here for the premiere. And through Television One, we worked with the breakfast show, and we had the weather presenter over the morning's news progressively be dressed like an elf, and then he delivered the last weather forecast in Elvish, which he'd learnt from the speech coach from the film. So again, really authentic content. And why did we do that? It was great for New Zealanders to see, but we did that so we had amazing rich content that we could syndicate with the media who were here. And it was picked up by the BBC, the Daily Mail, the Sydney Morning Herald, MSN and CTV. So really worth our while to work with our news, our media partners here to have great content that can be picked up and take our story further. And through that broadcast, we showed the locations. So we had a weather forecast, temperature all real for the summer, but we showed the locations of where you could visit that were in Film 1. All of that work through the media activity, the event at Hobbiton, those activations, meant we had amazing content that we could use over the premiere week in our social channels. And so we used a lot of that content. We had a guest curator for the week who was travelling around the country, who was a curator for our page, so that through the premiere week we were really focused on the Hobbit film. But through those activations and the media who were here, we were able to tap into their reach. So Anne Curry had her passport stamped. She tweeted that. We had Debbie from ETV who retweeted the weather forecast. And we had Sunrise who tweeted that they were going to be at Hobbiton the next day, which was the event where they were interviewing the dwarfs. So we had content that could then be reused through our social channels. And it hasn't stopped since the premiere. The interest, particularly from media, hasn't continued, and we're now able to get them into the locations from Film 1. And we're already seeing outstanding results. We had a press trip down here with Warner Brothers for the lead up of the DVD release, so we've got these little peaks and spikes right throughout the year that we can continue to sell the Hobbit story. A couple of them here which coincided with the release of the DVD in the UK market. And the DVD release, which has been phenomenal for the film, but also for us, because it does feature a 6-minute piece, behind the scenes, exclusive footage that Sir Peter Jackson did film for us as he was filming the trilogy. And that's been pulled together, and it's become an amazing clip for us to use that has the cast and crew comment, because we all know that word of mouth is so important for the promotion of our destination. So having the cast who were here living for 12 to 18 months talk about their experiences, talk about the locations and what they did, is really exposure that we can't buy. And we look forward to sharing that with you shortly when Matt talks through the opportunities with film and tourism. But everyone always says to me, that's great, you've had a great relationship with Warner Brothers, you've done great work, it all looks nice, but what's the return? What has it done? We've seen 4 things so far since the premiere. Leading up in December the 13th, a great gong for Tourism New Zealand and the team that were involved with the development of the campaign. It won the world's best travel campaign for 2012. That was the first thing we saw. Through our target market, active considerers, the second thing we saw was this increased awareness of the film. And I know it's a little bit hard with the sun here, but you can see from December 12 through December, a real sharp awareness of the trilogy in the film that it was produced in New Zealand. So it said to us that all of this work that we'd been building up on around the premiere was beginning to get traction. They knew that the film was coming out, which is great, but more importantly for us in tourism, they knew that it was filmed in New Zealand. From November, December, January, February and March, we've had record arrivals to our website, newzealand.com. So what we were able to do was that interest, that preference, that exposure that we'd created of the film was then beginning to make a difference to the visitation on newzealand.com. We have had a record 12 months, up 19% year on year for the year end March, with over 12 million visits to the site. But importantly, what we saw was we were driving paid traffic to newzealand.com, which is great, but we also saw a 23% increase over that premiere time of our organic traffic. So that traffic of people actually seeking out, making their own searches to find material on New Zealand, the Hobbit, Middle-earth. So a real interest that was turning into preference and traffic for us to convert to New Zealand. The third thing we saw is, you'll know, Tourism New Zealand doesn't actually sell anything, so we have to look for measures that says, is our activity working? So we use preference. We try to get active considerers, as many as possible, to have New Zealand as their first or second destination of choice. And we were really happy to see some of these trends happen from December onwards. So you can see we're tracking along. There's some quite good preference for New Zealand, but at each of those boxes at the premiere time, you can see a slight lift in preference. And importantly, a market that we saw back after Lord of the Rings, we had the biggest market share we've ever had, just at 1%. We started to see the US really move. So they'd been tracking in the low 40s. Straight after the premiere, the preference for New Zealand shot up to 52. And it stayed at 52 for January, February, and it's just dropped slightly to 49. So we're still holding an increased preference in our core key markets. And as you'll know from the visitor arrivals that were released on Monday, we are beginning to see that turn into actual arrivals to New Zealand. So in March, a 13% increase of international arrivals into New Zealand, and also an increase in February. But if we look at those March figures, what's really promising for us there is that increase from the US market, 24% arrivals. We are, and talking to our operators and talking to our partners up there, we've seen incredibly strong forward bookings as well. So we've seen the movie, we've leveraged it, we've got really strong, authentic content that drives the New Zealand message. We've seen that come through in our arrivals to newzealand.com. We've seen it come through in our preference, and now we're beginning to see it come through in our arrivals. So that's a really strong signal to us that New Zealand is seen as Middle-earth. It does create us a platform to tell the New Zealand story and to convert that into New Zealand arrivals. So at that point, I'd like to hand over to Matt. Or actually first, what we'll do is we'll show the feature, which is what was produced by Sir Peter. It's an amazing piece, and I do apologise, the screen here with the sun on it isn't going to do it justice, but very happy to provide you a link to that to view after this. So Cameron, if we can just play the feature, please.
I could have spent this entire shoot on location. We saw so many incredible places.
I know I'm a Kiwi, but I have to say I cannot imagine making these films anywhere but this country.
Amazing. Wherever we went, it was an extraordinary experience. And here we were, making film. Go, go, go! A New Zealand film. The Hobbit.
It's been thrilling to go back and go up and down both the main islands of New Zealand. And we began in Hobbiton.
When we first discovered the location, Hobbiton, back in 1998. There were 3 geographical things that made us choose it as Hobbiton.
We need a distinctive tree set in rolling hillside, ideally with a little lake and a hill behind the tree rising up to give us the position of being.
It looked like Hobbiton, it just looked like a place where people actually lived and people worked.
The highlights have definitely been watching Hobbiton from the air, which is something that I don't think was really done in Lord of the Rings. Seeing it like this kind of living model village is just extraordinary.
The original Hobbiton set was built out of polystyrene. And even though we had to take it away, which I thought it was a shame, it actually wouldn't have survived. Of course, doing The Hobbit now, it gave us the ability to rebuild Hobbiton out of permanent materials.
And it's been made to last out of materials that aren't going to deteriorate, and we can carry on showing people what's involved in making a movie.
People who've seen the films can go and relive them by actually knocking on Bilbo's door.
Or you can just look and see there's no having to finish the illusion. It's just here.
Camp here for the night. Billy, Killy, go for the ponies.
Denise Bluffs is its volcanic activity has brought the rock up out of the ground. I mean, there's these huge shafts of rock.
It looked like something from Jurassic Park.
You can't do any helicopter shots coming over from the back because it's behind it's just ply and
scaffold.
But it'll all come out, I think, in a couple of weeks.
And then there's going to be a permanent one put in place for as a tourist attraction.
There are beautiful rock formations, cliffs, and then down, down, down into the most incredible bush.
It seemed ancient. There were lots of moss on all the great rocks. It seemed incredibly old.
It's a lot of native bush in that area. It's a stunning location.
In this area, which is the Twizel area, we managed to get a bunch of shots up on a hill above Lake Pukaki.
It was a beautiful vista, like it was long, wheaten-coloured kind of grass, and we'd be running through it and being chased by wargs.
The landscape is really interesting geographically. We're being chased by these terrible monsters. It's just everything you could hope for in an epic adventure. I took a photo that I sent to some friends.
Dwarves on vacation.
And they refused to believe that this was an actual photograph, that I hadn't photoshopped it, that place doesn't exist. And I was standing here.
Here we are at base camp, ready for the big push to Rangi, Mount Cook.
Behind us here is Mount Cook, which is New Zealand's highest mountain. That's where Sir Edmund Hillary trained to climb Mount Everest. It's a little less than half the height of Everest, so he basically had to climb Mount Cook twice, and he sort of had practice for Everest, basically.
Very, very beautiful, huge open spaces, lovely wild flowers. I remember going along all the roads, like just all kind of colours.
We hit it at this time of year where there are these incredible variety of shades of purple lupins just, springing up everywhere. Nearly everyone on the crew has said it was like doing a recce for an amazing road trip they're going to do in the future.
They always say don't leave home until you've seen the country. Now I've seen the country and I'm pretty blown away by it.
So, Strathtyre, central Otago, a pretty remote location. We wanted to use this location primarily because it's a chase through the rocks, wargs, after the dwarves. So I love the idea of doing a chase that was that spread out over a huge landscape.
This is glorious about this place, is you can do 360 degrees. There's not a satellite dish in sight.
When we all went to Queenstown, I'd never been there before, and it was just astonishing. I mean, a beautiful jewel, really at the bottom of the world.
Queenstown, a famous holiday place here, but we escape the crowds and go up the lake and into the mountains, and that's perhaps my favourite spot.
Earnshaw Burn was probably one of my favourite locations, a gorgeous alpine sort of valley surrounded by waterfalls.
The place was alive with these incredible cascades. We're very lucky to go to some extraordinary locations.
A lot of the world's impression of New Zealand is that landscape You know, the rolling hills and the mountains and the fjords. It's got everything in it.
It's real, it's the real countryside. But at first you think, wow, what a good job they made. But it's not, it's the real thing.
This is the Middle-earth I would always have pictured.
Meanwhile, the backdrop is so beautiful people will think it's CGI. It looks too perfect. You can use that as an advert for New Zealand if you want. I mean, succinct, snappy, all positive, and cut. Brilliant, trademarked.
It's a hard act to follow all of them, actually, but they did a pretty good job of explaining everything. But when I travel internationally, it always staggers me how many people I meet who make the connection between New Zealand and the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. In the eyes of those who saw our films, New Zealand became Middle-earth and Tolkien's fantasy became somewhere you can visit. Perhaps no one knows this better than the cast and crew of the films themselves. We spent months and months shooting on locations all over the country in places that sound and, of course, look like they were pulled straight from the pages of a fantasy novel. The Mavora Lakes, Mount Olympus, Bog Pine Paddock, and, of course, Paradise. While we did get a few complaints from the actors about the lack of good sushi in Pew Pew, or the lack of plumbing on Mount Doom, everyone embraced the experience of filming here, and they continue to speak incredibly fondly of the country, its people, and the breathtaking locations we worked in. As you've just seen in the featurette that accompanied the release of the first DVD, Elijah Wood, Andy Serkis, Serene McKellen, and many more of our actors have become ambassadors for the country. A decade on from The Lord of the Rings, the films in which those actors became Frodo, Gollum, and Gandalf, we see fans arrive in New Zealand armed with the trilogy on their iPads and a GPS in hand. They hope to visit the exact spot where a particular scene was shot, and they can. The Lord of the Rings films seem to catch the imagination of so many, not just those die-hard Tolkien fans, but filmgoers everywhere have been captivated by the scenes set in New Zealand's fjords, Alps and forests, and they want to see them for themselves. It is true that we were caught somewhat by surprise in the interest the Lord of the Rings films generated in New Zealand. This time, though, as we brought The Hobbit to the screen, we hoped the interest would reignite. Tourism New Zealand had a vision, which we shared, to ensure excitement for the films would translate into even more interest in New Zealand and even more visitors. The result was the 100% Middle-earth campaign. Catherine has already talked about the success of the campaign to date. It's remarkable to hear the statistics as well. In December 2012, the month The Hobbit was released, Expedia reported an 84% increase of flight bookings to New Zealand from December the previous year. Visitors to the home of Bilbo Baggins are up 100% on the previous year also. Spurred on by the legions of fans visiting, Peter decided to rebuild the Hobbiton movie set in Matamata out of permanent materials. Visitors pass through the Alexander's family farm and emerge in a little slice of Middle-earth. The reaction to the experience has been overwhelmingly positive, and 80% of the visitors are international. 300,000 people annually are stopping into the Matamata Visitor Information Centre, where our set builders have created a Hobbit-style gatehouse. This number is up from 30,000 a decade ago. There is, of course, much more to explore in New Zealand than that now famous farm in Matamata. Travellers to New Zealand trek north to south, city to town, mountain to sea. The close proximity of one location to another is a boon to both filmmaker and traveller alike. Unlike a Hollywood theme park, there is no special soundtrack or special effect that accompany their visit. New Zealand is a real place, a place that visitors can embrace and explore for themselves, just as we've embraced and explored those landscapes in creating Middle-earth. Thanks.
It's a very hard act to follow both of these people. Cheers. I've been asked many times why New Zealand is such a great film location. It's pretty easy to answer. I set out over 15 years ago and set up a stand at the Film Locations Expo held annually to promote New Zealand as a filming destination. I'd earlier been visited by NBC, the US TV channel, who wanted to make James Clavell's book Gaijin here. And after touring the country with one of their executives, he turned to me and said, "You just simply don't appreciate what you have here, the closeness of the locations and all the different looks that are available here. It's just breathtaking." The Japanese partners made the decision to shoot in Japan, and they never came here. But back in LA, as I wandered about the Locations Expo, this is 15, nearly 18 years ago, I saw all the different countries exhibiting, and each one was stunning. Montana, Switzerland, Hawaii, everywhere. But one thing struck me. We had all of those same looks, or similar, within our shores. So I feel that this is our competitive advantage. We don't have to travel far to get a myriad of different looks, which is a huge incentive, budget-wise, for any producer. When we shot the world's fastest Indian in Invercargill in Utah, we said to the Invercargill Council at the end of it all how much the interest the locals had displayed in the beach racing. And we said it would be a great idea to set up an annual event for bikers to test their machines on the beach, as we had done whilst we were making the film. Well, someone took that advice and ran with it, and the Burt Munro Challenge was born. It's run every year at the end of November, and 6,000 bikies from all over the world congregate in Invercargill and create mayhem for 5 days. But the most interesting fact is that because of our film reigniting an interest in beach racing, it's listed in Time magazine's travel section as one of the 5 festive events you don't want to miss in 2013. It's right up there with the Eurovision Song Quest. And who would have thought that? But it's Time magazine, so they know. I'd shot a TV commercial for Germany for a milk product, and the German crew loved their Kiwi experience and went home happy. About 2 years later, the producer, Ozzy von Richthofen, grandson of the Red Baron, World War I fighter ace, rang me and asked me if we had snow in New Zealand in November. I assured him that we did in our glaciers. And he arrived about 2 days later from South Africa, and we went to Queenstown, hopped on a chopper, took pictures, and he went back to South Africa, where they were preparing to film 10,000 BC for Warner Brothers with Roland Emmerich directing. Now, Roland did films like Day After Tomorrow, Independence Day, and has poured billions back to the studios in LA. They wanted to find a snowy pass the Mammoth Hunters cross when they pursue their sister's kidnapper. It was a simple 3-day shoot, and they would shoot it after they finished shooting in Africa about October of that same year. Ozzy went back to Africa, and then rang me about a week later and informed me that Roland was so impressed with the pictures that he wanted to come out himself before they started shooting in Africa and see New Zealand. So he landed with several executives. We went back to Queenstown. We got several choppers and went back to the glacier. Everyone loved it. On the way back, in the helicopter, Roland said to me, "What's that there?" and pointed down to the valley below me and asked if we could land there. And I knew who owned the farm, so we landed on it. And he got out and he went, and I thought, what's he doing? And he said, when I was writing the script for this film, he said, "That's exactly how I imagined this to be." He said, "That's exactly what I was imagining." So he said, "Can you take that chopper, go back to Queenstown, pick up the executives and bring them back to this spot? I'll stay here." So I left him on the side of the mountain, took the chopper, went back, got the executives from Queenstown, and he announced that they were going to shoot the film here in Wanaka, in the Wanaka region. That decision cost over $8 million to make the shift from Africa to New Zealand, and we gained about $26 million in foreign exchange. The South Africans were quite depressed about it, and I was told that I shouldn't holiday in Africa anytime soon. But Roland's experience in New Zealand was a magical one for him creatively, although a nightmare for the studio execs. And he talked about this thing that we cannot sell, and it's called New Zealand ink, and it's all about the way we Kiwis, if we are treated fairly, then we'll go out of our way to create whatever is asked of us. So 450 Kiwis trudged 5,500 feet above snow level, day after day in atrocious conditions after our little German friend as he put together his film, and he loved it. And When you see the Empire State Building, you think of New York. The Opera House, you think of Sydney, and the gorgeous lakes, mountains, lakes and rivers and stunning landscapes define us as a country and make our 100% pure brand sing loud and proud. Films influence that brand by assisting to raise tourist expectation. Then we have to sustain that interest, and that's easy once they are here. New Zealand Inc., our wines, our food, how many times have I heard, oh my God, that's how tomatoes should taste, from American visitors. I've met with an executive from HBO in LA each year for an hour every year for 12 years. And last month he came here on a private visit. And I, along with Film Auckland, hosted him and his family. He got to sail on America's Cup yacht in our harbour. We choppered him to the black sand West Coast beaches, and we came back through Waitakere Bush to the glorious East Coast, white sand beaches and our beautiful bays and harbours. And then we dumped him at the vineyard in Waiheke, which is a tough call. And we made him come back on the ferry, back to his hotel, which is just over here. At dinner that night, he bought a whole lot of HBO product as a present for me, and he held up HBO's box set of The Pacific, which they made with Steven Spielberg, and that cost $200 million and was made in Australia. Then he mentioned Game of Thrones, which is another $200 million, and it was made in Belfast. And then he talked about New Zealand and how impressed he'd been about it. So now we wait with bated breath and still work actively to get something down here from HBO. He again loved his Kiwi experience, so my point, I guess, that I try and make is that everyone that comes here loves it and wants to come back. We just have to get them here, and that's where film and tourism work together to keep our visual identity in front of the rest of the world. Thanks for your time. Cheers.